All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our fourth and final Brownfield's quarterly roundtable of 2022. Hard to believe we're here. Happy holidays. We appreciate the approximately 15 or so people in the room in person, and we appreciate the 50-ish people who are joining us online. Got a good crowd today. We have an excellent lineup as usual. My team really works hard to pull together an awesome list of speakers to bring to you things that are very pertinent to brownfields, peripheral to brownfields, but always interesting. I want to also thank Tyrone and Anthony, who's our RT group, who we are running the only hybrid session at DEP right now. No other groups are presently offering in-person and hybrid for their presentations. And only because of Tyrone and Anthony. So thank you guys for your work. If you are in the room in person today, please make sure to use your microphone that are spaced around the room so that our friends at home can hear your questions as well. I'm not saying they're necessarily at home, at work or at home, wherever they may be. Again, thank my team, puts a lot of work into coming up with these agendas and nailing down the speakers, coordinating with our IT group. Thank you to my team. I'm just going to go quickly. I am Bill Lindner. I manage the Office of Brownfield and Community Revitalization. For those of you who are new to this program, we've been doing this for a very long time and we'll continue to do it for a very long time. Quarterly, our new agenda will be coming out sometime probably in January. We usually try to get you guys a save the dates email saying, these are going to be our quarterly events. Today we have some really great speakers. We have our very own Rachel Stopper, who will give us an update on the HDSRF numbers, but not only the numbers, but also some other interesting information. Katie Hogue, who is one of our hourlies, will be assisting her. We have an update or information about PFAS, perfluorinated, what's the rest of it, Frank? Alcohol substances. Some people know it as PFAS, some people know it as PFOA. It's probably beyond an emerging contaminant. It's somewhere between emerging and standard. It is emerging in a lot of places, but anyway, we're going to get an update from one of our inside DEP experts, Erica Snyder, about PFAS, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how PFAS contamination may be impacting brownfields, redevelopment projects. We're going to have an update from NJIT. We're going to have an update from our friends at the New Jersey Economic Development Authority to talk to you about brownfields funding programs. We are going to have a discussion from Vince Mazzei about the inland flood protection and how those rules may impact redevelopment. We're going to have a CCI update from Frank McLaughlin. We're going to talk about natural and working land strategy and how you can use brownfields for carbon sequestration, right? That's a hot buzzword right now. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to give you an update about the brownfields development areas inside our office. We're going to talk a little bit about alternative fill opportunities. Some people have heard the term dirty dirt. So we have dirty dirt piles throughout the state that need a home. And maybe, just maybe, one of the brownfield sites that somebody in the room or virtually is working on could be that home. And not as a foster, as a permanent home for this pile. So we can only hope that we can make a match today. And then we'll have an update from our friends at US EPA, who always have interesting information for us to discuss and to enjoy. With that, I would like to hand this off to Rachel Stopper, who is our lead for the Hazardous Discharge Site Remediation Program here at DEP, which for anybody new coming to this program is the fund that is used mostly by municipalities and government entities to fund investigations of sites that they are not the discharger at. So let me hand it off to Rachel for the update. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Rachel Stopper, and I'm an HTS rep coordinator in the Brownfields office. And I'm going to give a very brief update on the fund. So as far as staffing goes, we still have 2 HTS rep coordinators, myself and Charlotte Leone, who's here with us in the public hearing room today. And as far as the status of the fund, for fiscal year 23, we have an uncommitted balance of 66.6. That is based on the most current information that I have received from our own funding people here. And an update on the recommendations. So for current year, so this year for 2022, Charlotte and I have sent over 22.3 million in recommendations to the EDA. And if we had more staffing, we could get a lot more out the door. Okay.
We are working on that.
Yeah, so maybe some of you on social media may have seen that we had a hiring blitz going on, and one of those positions will be coming to the Brownfields office to fill an HTS rep coordinator position. We're just not sure of timing. Okay. So something very exciting that the Brownfields office did is we contracted with an economic redevelop economists from the University of Whitewater, Wisconsin, and they performed an economic analysis of our HTSRF program. And that is a picture of the Haddon Town Center, and we'll be talking about that project during the presentation. So there are some, and I know Bill, I know you said maybe you want to talk about this a little bit, but these are some reasons why we decided to do an economic analysis. So our program has been around since 1993, so we consider that to be successful, and it's still very popular. So let's learn a little bit more about it. We wanted to know the leveraging effects of the HTSRF program over time. And EPA and some other states in the nation had done economic analyses on their brownfield program, and we wanted to do the same. And then also, what could we learn about the HTSRF program from an economic analysis? Okay, so we had supplied the economic, I'll just call them whitewater analysis. We provided them data over a 12-year time frame. So this is HTSRF data starting from the time that we started allocating more money to municipalities. So it's about 10 to 12-year time frame. And these were all grants to municipalities that were over $50,000. So some of the information that we sent over were things like phase of work, or how much was the grant, the GPS coordinates of the site location itself, and some other data. And so any images that you might see in this presentation are draft. These are from the draft reports that we have received from University of Whitewater.
The information is draft as well.
And the information, the conclusions that have been drawn from this data as well. And so, but we did want to talk about some of the interesting things that was found out. And so these two pie charts represent a breakdown of awarded funds. And if you look at the pie chart on the top, the yellow area represents remedial investigation. And all that is showing is that most of the grants that we gave out over a 12-year time period were for remedial investigation. And that makes sense because the grants were over $50,000. You wouldn't typically see PA or SI grants that were that high. And I think this is very good because it shows that HTSRF can be used to fully characterize sites and get them ready for remedial action and redevelopment. If you look at the pie chart on the bottom, the purple area, that bottom pie chart is showing grants by phase of work. So the so the amount related to the phase of work. And so the purple shows that the majority of the money that went out over that 12-year time period was for remedial action, which is to be expected because remedial action is some of those grants are our most expensive. Okay. So for this project, for this analysis here, this is related to a specific sample size of remedial action grants. And it is showing the increase in assessed value of that site that received HTSRF funding, that received remedial action funding. And so as what you can see is that we gave 37.68 million through the HTSRF for remedial action. And there was a 286 million increase in the taxable assessed value of those HTSRF sites. And then you can see some of those redevelopments there. Okay, so this one is very interesting. So this is the economic impact of residents in brownfield housing. So imagine there's a brownfield site and housing is built on that brownfield site. And then the people living in that brownfield housing go and shop in their local communities. And so we're going to see things like employment, which is the number of jobs due to spending by residents in brownfield housing. So the people living in the housing are going shopping and there are jobs available that other people are working to support them. There's the labor income, which is the amount of money employees earn by working. So still, this is the surrounding businesses that are supporting the people living in brownfields housing. It's the amount of money they're earning. And then you have your output, which is the total economic output of the result of the employment. And then you have typical terms like direct effect, indirect, and induced effect. And Katie, you might be able to go over some of that a little bit.
Yes, so the direct effect is just the residents living in the housing going out and spending their money in the local businesses. And then both the indirect and induced effects are how that affects the regional and state economy as a whole.
And so these were significant outputs. And you'll be able to see studies like this in the report when it comes out. And so the picture that you saw in the first slide was the Haddon Town Center, which was an old industrial site, about 6 acres, and it was an old diaper wash facility. And you can see a before and after picture here. And one of the really good metrics that we wanted to talk about was that we gave 3.5 million in HTSRF grants, and that increased the assessed value of the tax block that housing is on by 50 million, and then the site itself is worth 55 million. So that's a big improvement from what you can see in the before picture there.
And the increase in the tax block was in the year after Haddon Town Center opened, so in 2018, and it opened in 2017.
And in conclusion, in the draft report, the economists concluded that the HTSRF has had a substantial and concrete impact on the economy, and that the remediation of a single brownfield site can catalyze local redevelopment and revitalize entire communities. And we're very excited to share this report when it comes out. Sure, Tony.
This one's on that.
Yeah, you're talking about it. So you're talking about an increase in investment about 16-fold. We put out 3.5 and the rate of return is like 55.
And that was just a year after opening.
Right. So I mean that's just phenomenal. I mean you can't do any better than that, Bill.
Yeah, no, we're really.
Yeah. Well, I'll just continue. I mean, even at that rate of return, like 15-fold, and this is just housing. Could you imagine if this was industrial or commercial? It'd probably be.
Yeah, no, Tony's absolutely right. I mean, this is sort of a teaser for the report. We just wanted to let some people know that this thing is coming out. You know, although we hired a redevelopment economist to do the stuff we couldn't do, this has also been a tremendous amount of work for my team and myself to pull this information together, to get them the information, to Jerseyify the stuff that Wisconsin doesn't understand about the uniqueness of working here in this state. And I think this is going to be something really, really useful. And, you know, we're pretty proud of it so far. We expect, or we're hoping that it you know, will have some sort of published date in the next, you know, in the first quarter of 2023. We are working right now on our final draft with our contractor, and you know, we're going to have 3 different versions of the report. It'll be a glossy brochure, sort of an interim middle of the road one with information and charts, and then sort of the full-blown white paper, which will be probably about 75 pages. So you know, we chose sort of an arbitrary number of $50,000, thinking it's enough money to be relevant, and it's and also when there was significant changes to the statute about how the HDSRF money is distributed, which was about 2006, right, Rachel?
Yep.
So we chose that date as sort of the current way that HDSRF operates, and did an evaluation on that instead of also evaluating things that we felt we had already fixed previous to 2006. So it's going to be pretty cool. We're looking forward to it. And yes, Shanine, comment if you could speak into the mic. Thank you. Green
Thank
button.
you, Adolph.
There you go.
I have a quick question.
Yeah,
Is it HDSRF funds alone that led to the successful redevelopment of this project, or were there additional funding sources that were necessary?
There may or may not have been. So we do not split. We didn't split that hair in
Right.
these projects. So there could have been many other sources of including EPA money that may have been involved in some of these. But we were trying to put a box around it and tried to determine, you know, what we
The
had.
data we provided, these were all sites that received HDSRF, but as part of the report, there's gonna be case studies and success stories that outline some of the other leveraged funding. So some of the
Yes.
projects that are featured in the report, you'll see in a success story at the end of the report, and it'll outline if there was EPA funding or other funding.
Thank you, Rachel, for that.
Actually, because of all the funding sources that sometimes go into these projects, it would be impossible though but you know, some of them are, you know, obviously EPA funded. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Bill.
I wasn't even thinking about EPA. I was just putting on my research hat. You're helping me get to a goal that I need to accomplish my personal self. But no, this is really helpful. Thank you. Just wanted to know, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, what's interesting, and I don't want to get to the conclusions that are coming, right? But the leveraging effect in the suburban areas and the urban areas were both amazing. I mean, we just saw this. So I won't give away too much.
No, but we do get into some pretty cool stuff, you know, like putting a dollar value on parks, on creating brownfields into parks, right? Which has always been this big sort of nebulous thing about, well, what's the value of a park, right? You know, everybody likes to be able to say, well, yeah, it's great for health and this and that, but you know, we also get into what was the impact of building that park on the home values surrounding that area, you know, like, so really trying to push out the impact of brownfield redevelopment as a whole. You know, we talk about housing, we talk about parks, we talk about manufacturing, and try to break out a little bit in each section about, you know, the domino effect of that investment. So yeah, I think it's going to be pretty exciting. So we're looking forward to it.
I agree with you 100% because the thing about it is, you know, going into utilizing the bill funding, we're now giving grants out at a larger amount. So
Right.
is it our EPA grant funding as a standalone that's leading to this redevelopment success, or do you need other pieces of the puzzle to get to the promised land? Can you just standalone with EPA, or do you need other pieces? So that's what, you know, we need to figure out internally
Yeah.
And I think that I'm looking forward to hearing about this report. And
Yeah, I think it'll be really helpful for you guys to sort of make some decisions, right? About how to put
Right.
money and, bang for the buck and all that stuff about, where do we get the most dominoes to fall, right?
right.
Um,
Exactly. And we know each project is a snowflake. And you
Yes.
have small communities that might just utilize HDSRF or EPA funding, but then for like bigger projects or bigger cities, like they probably do need to leverage additional resources.
Yes.
So what does that look like?
Absolutely.
And a lot of times too, Janine, these HDSRF funds,
He's got it.
these funds is actually act as seed money and to
Correct.
bring people to the table. Because once you have this, the little bit of money up front, or you see somebody else is investing into it or have a stake it, or as like I always say, stake in the game, then, you have other people who jump on because they figured you did your due diligence, that this is a good project, so I don't have to start from scratch. If you're going to put in, 3.5 million, hey, I could throw in another 2 or 3 million. So, that's usually really helps, really good. Well, Rachel, one more thing I want to add, the picture is phenomenal. And then not only do you have a photo, but you have the.
Oh, Katie put the presentation together. It's beautiful.
Yeah, the photos are phenomenal, but the empirical data is there also to just back it up. I look at the top picture and I say, okay, that's $600,000. On the bottom is like 50 billion.
Yep.
I mean, it's just phenomenal.
That's going to be good stuff.
Yeah, it's more than that. That's just the assessed value.
Richard.
Fact.
Yeah, and I recognize this was over 4 years ago too, right? So I'm pretty sure that's assessed value. It's probably almost 100 million now, probably.
All right, Rachel and Katie, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, JR.
Sure.
This is great. It's really hard. It's something we could never do, put all the work in to come up with numbers. And so I appreciate you guys doing that. Although, as far as what the leverage is, you should also be including the cost of the development, which would make it a little less happy, but it's still happy.
True.
So one thing I would recommend, so you talked about Jerseyifying like everything. And if you guys could, after you release the report, to show the math so that communities can, so that I can Trentonify your Jerseyify thing.
Right.
And I realize there's probably a lot of assumptions in there, but if you hired the smartest people in the world, then that's the hardest part, is finding like, okay, who figured out what all the assumptions are and why
Right.
they make sense.
There's a program called IMPLAN. I don't know if there's any redevelopment economists in the audience that you may have heard of it. It's a pretty specific to this field. And that program allows for some assumptions to be plugged in. I am certainly not going to try to comment on what they are or why they should be, but that will be part of the discussion in the report. Will explain some of that.
Right, because then potentially communities can all do their own math and even potentially report back on,
Yes,
on what the
value
value
or
of
the leveraged value.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, JR. All right, Rachel and Katie,
you.
thank you so much for that update. We are going to move to our next presenter, Erica Snyder, who is with the Bureau of Environmental Evaluation and Risk Assessment and is a research scientist there. And she's going to talk to us about PFAS.
Hello, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Erica Snyder. I'm in the department's Contaminated Site Remediation and Redevelopment Program, and I work in the Bureau of Environmental Evaluation and Risk Assessment. I'm one of the leads for soil standard development, and I'm a human health risk assessor. Today, I'm here to talk to you about the department's recently released interim soil and soil leachate remediation standards for PFAS. Next slide. The department developed interim remediation standards for soil and soil leachate for PFNA, PFOA, PFOS, and GenX, and those standards were published in the New Jersey Register on October 17th, 2022. The remediation standards rule gives the department the authority to develop and release interim remediation standards for contaminants of emerging concern where there are known health effects and the department does not have previously promulgated standards. The interim remediation standards are not promulgated standards, but they do give the department the authority, and they are effective upon publication in the New Jersey Register. The remediation standards rule has 3 sets of soil standards. Those are for the ingestion dermal exposure pathway, the inhalation exposure pathway, and the migration to groundwater exposure pathway. The ingestion dermal and inhalation soil remediation standards are to be applied to contamination throughout the soil column. The migration to groundwater soil remediation standards are to be applied to contamination in unsaturated soils only, which means the surface to the water table. Next slide. This here lays out all the department's interim remediation standards for PFNA, PFOA, PFOS, and GenX. Going from the left and moving to the right, the first set of standards are for the ingestion dermal exposure pathway. Consistent with all the other soil remediation standards for this pathway, there are 2 sets of standards. The first are the residential soil remediation standards, which are to be applied at residences, schools, and child care centers. The second set of standards, the non-residential soil remediation standards, are to be applied at commercial and industrial sites. Moving on in the table are the migration to groundwater soil remediation standards. There are 2 sets of standards for this pathway as well, the soil remediation standards and the soil leachate remediation standards. You'll probably notice right away that there are no standards listed for GenX. And this is because in order to calculate standards for the migration to groundwater pathway, we need a groundwater remediation standard. And at this point, the department does not have a groundwater remediation standard for GenX. If in the future one is released, we will update the migration to groundwater standards to incorporate values and standards for GenX as well. So the other thing you're probably all noticing is the soil remediation standards for the migration to groundwater. There are no numeric values. These standards have to be developed on an area of concern or site-specific basis. This would be done using the department's alternative remediation standards technical guidance for the migration to groundwater exposure pathway, along with the synthetic precipitation leaching procedure, which is an alternative remediation standard option for the migration to groundwater pathway. The reason for this is, PFAS always seems to be the exception to the rule for everything, makes things a little bit more difficult. And due to the chemistry of these compounds and how they interact under environmental conditions, there's just a lot of variability on the chemical properties. And because of this, those properties and the calculations need to be determined on an area of concern or site-specific basis. Moving on, the soil leachate remediation standards for the migration to groundwater pathway, we do have numerical values for these, and it's a simple calculation of taking the department's groundwater remediation standard and multiplying it by the default dilution attenuation factor of 20. This is how we calculate all the soil leachate remediation standards. The soil leachate remediation standards are to be used in conjunction with the synthetic precipitation leaching procedure. They're not being compared directly to soil concentrations or leachate concentrations in soil. They're used along with the SPLP procedure, and based on the results and the outputs, that data goes into developing the AOC and site-specific standard. Lastly, there are no inhalation soil remediation standards for PFAS. At this time, the department has chosen not to release them for 2 main reasons. The first being that there's very limited inhalation toxicity information to develop inhalation standards for PFAS, because all the studies to date have focused primarily on the oral route of exposure versus the inhalation. The other being difficulties and uncertainties with chemical properties information, which is needed in the equations to calculate inhalation soil remediation standards. With that said, though, the department is confident that both the ingestion dermal and migration to groundwater soil remediation standards would be more stringent than anything that we would develop for the inhalation pathway. So what we are presently releasing is protective. Next slide. This here is a link where you can access the interim soil and soil leachate remediation standards. If you were to click on that link, it takes you to next slide. This page and the interim standards are broken up by exposure pathway, with ingestion dermal on the top, followed by migration to groundwater soil remediation standards, and then migration to groundwater soil leachate remediation standards. These tables provide the health-based criteria, the reporting limits, the groundwater remediation standards, and if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty and figure out all the technical details on the derivation of these standards, there's a fact sheet to the right that you can click on that'll provide all of that information. Next slide. Okay, so upon release of these standards, the next big questions that come up are, do these apply to me? The interim soil and soil leachate remediation standards for PFAS are applicable to all sites in the contaminated site remediation and redevelopment program. And depending on whether it's a new site or where you are in your remediation, what phase, it will affect how they're applicable and how you should be addressing them. If it's a new site or you're in the beginning of investigating, you would conduct your preliminary assessment or an equivalent evaluation to determine if PFAS is of concern. If it's of concern, you would move on to the next phase. If it's not of concern, then there would be no need to collect samples for PFAS in soil. If you are in the next phase and PFAS is of concern, let's say you're in your site investigation, you'd collect your soil samples. If they're above the standards, you need to move on to the next phase. If they are below the standards, then there's no need to carry PFAS forward into the remedial investigation or remedial actions. For these interim standards, there are no order of magnitude provisions because there are no previous standards to compare them against. These are the first soil standards for PFAS that the department's released. In addition, because there's no previous standards, there's no phase-in period. And as I mentioned earlier, the standards are effective the date of October 17th, 2022, which was the date of publication in the register. For cases in the site remediation program that are ongoing, the PFAS cases would be handled similarly to how the cases were handled when the interim groundwater standards for PFAS were released. And there would be an allowance to create a separate case with separate time frames to address the PFAS. Next slide. And now that we get to addressing PFAS, what do I need to do? Again, if it's a newer site, you would address PFAS in your preliminary assessment or equivalent evaluation. An example is, say you have number 2 fuel oil stored at the site. PFAS may not be of concern. You don't typically see PFAS with number 2 fuel oil. However, if there was a number 2 fuel oil fire and firefighting foam was applied, then you would want to move PFAS on into the next phase because there are types of firefighting foam, AFFF, that are known to contain PFAS. If your site is active, you're in your SI, RI phase, you would address PFAS in a preliminary assessment addendum or an equivalent evaluation, or you could address it through your site investigation or remedial investigation soil sampling. For sites that have received restricted use RAO, you would address PFAS in the next biennial protectiveness certification. For sites that received an unrestricted use RAO, those sites would be addressed whenever they re-entered the contaminated site remediation and redevelopment program, and they'd be handled by conducting a preliminary assessment or an equivalent evaluation. Next slide. So today I'm here to provide you all with a brief overview, but if you have additional questions, I wanted to provide the appropriate contacts. If you have any administrative questions regarding to case creation or splitting of cases or merging of cases, you would contact the BCANE duty officer. The number's listed here, and it can also be found on the department's site remediation program contact list. If you have particular questions on the standards themselves or the applicability, you would contact either myself or Alan Motter, who is the remediation standards rule manager. Both of our information is on this slide, but it's also on the SRP contact page as well. Next slide. And if we have some time, I can take questions if anybody has any questions.
Yes, Adolf. We have one from in the room here.
Hi, this is Adolf Everett from EPA. Just a quick question. I was wondering if, as far as the labs, are the labs certified to do this analysis? Is it something that they're doing, or it's something that they would need to kind of get up to speed on? I was just wondering if you can comment on that.
Yeah, great question. Starting last year, the department's Office of Quality Assurance began accepting applications for laboratories that wanted to develop a user-defined method for soils and sediments to analyze PFAS. And to date, there are 5 labs that are certified. Those labs can be found by going onto the DEP's data miner website. And there's a category for certified laboratories that you would check on, and then that takes you to a main page. And towards the bottom of that page, there's a link that says solid and chemical matrices, I believe, and the labs that are certified for soil and sediments can be found there. The department also did a study to determine whether the synthetic precipitation leaching procedure was effective for PFAS, because there was concerns about contaminant absorption onto the glass apparatus. But that study, fortunately, did not identify any issues for the PFAS compounds. We had excellent percent recoveries, so we feel confident with using the SPLP procedure as well.
I have one question. Erica, can you you use the term Gen X? Can you define that?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, Gen X is technically the compound is hexafluoropropylene dimer oxide and it's ammonium salt. It's made up of the toxicity information we have is made up of those 2 compounds. We decided to include Gen X because we do have facilities in the state that have discharged it, and we have found it in media. And there are health effects, and we have information to develop those standards.
Erica, hi, Frank McLaughlin from down the hall from
Yeah, hi, Frank.
your bureau. And thank you for the presentation. Erica, would you tell the audience here, mostly municipal officials and LSRPs who do work in brownfield sites, what type of, I know this is a very broad question, but maybe you can help them a little bit with, like, what type of facilities are associated with these huge family of compounds, and very basically where you are seeing problems in water systems?
Okay, so some things you want to keep in mind was, has there been a history of fires? Has firefighting foam been applied? That's a big one. Coating operations can be associated with it. The department also has a website for contaminants emerging concern that's on the SRP website that provides a list of SIC and NAICS codes that they're all industries that can be associated with PFAS. Now, this isn't supposed to be used as your ultimate determinant that, okay, this is of concern, but it can be used as a line of evidence to determine of, oh, do I need to, maybe I do need to do some soil investigation, or perhaps I need to find out more about the history. That can all be used as a tool to determine if PFAS is an issue. And in regards to PFAS, it's been on the news. We're finding it in water systems. We've even found it in rainwater. An article came out recently about that. There's not been as much soil sampling conducted as groundwater because, the standards are just coming out, but we have seen it in soil. So we're doing our best right now to address it, because we know it is in the state of New Jersey and that it is a health concern. But we're learning new things every single day.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I know that was a broad question, and just from our office working with some communities, we know communities like Paulsboro, we know communities like Camden, we know communities like Perth Amboy, North Plainfield. So they're finding it in a lot of urban water systems. So
Yeah.
and I guess we're all working back from there. But thank you guys for all the hard work in getting these standards and the laboratory stuff done, so we can all make sure that our water supply and our sites are safe. Thanks, Erica.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we have got one more question from
Okay.
our online audience. This is from Nick Huzar. We all know that PFAS compounds are going to be detected if we sample. Can it be treated like historic fill if there are no receptors?
We're not at that stage right now to say whether it would be a historic fill contaminant. The department is evaluating conducting a background soil study for PFAS to help us answer questions like that. Is it everywhere? Is it at concentrations above standards? So moving forward, maybe that's something we'll do, but at this time we're not.
I have one more question, Erica. So Erica, if you do find it, what is the remedial action for it? Do we have ways of treating this or addressing it?
So, yeah, as PFAS is complicated in all manners, there are ways to address it. But again, this is a science that, we're finding out new ways. The majority of options at this point involve removal and taking it to a disposal facility. I don't have a list of disposal facilities, but I do know that there are facilities that are accepting it. Of technical consultations that I've been on, that's been the main remedial action. Incineration was an option at this point, but now there's concerns about that, so that's not really a recommended option at this time. There's also discussions of some in situ options. None of them have been applied in the state of New Jersey that I'm aware of, but if you want additional information on those, the ITRC has an excellent PFAS technical guidance, and it does talk about what options are available for PFAS.
All right. Thank you so much, Erica. Really good information. And just, for people who are news watchers, these are the things that on the news, they call them forever chemicals. And part of the reason for that is that they don't break down readily in the environment. Many compounds that we deal with in site remediation break down in the environment naturally on their own. This is not one of them that does that readily. So that is sort of some of the hurdles for treatment and some of the hurdles about the persistence of these particular suite of compounds. So Erica, we appreciate your time. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. We're running a couple minutes behind, but we are going to now get an update from our friends at NJIT. And Kaylin Bruno will be giving us a quick update on breaking brownfields.
Okay, hi everyone, good morning. I'm Kaylin Bruno, Project Manager at NJIT, Center for Community Systems. And I'm here today representing our two Brownfields programs, the Technical Assistance to Brownfields Community Program, otherwise known as NJIT TAB, and the New Jersey Brownfield Assistance Center at NJIT. I'm excited to be here today to share with you two opportunities for New Jersey's local governments and nonprofits to showcase brownfield redevelopment projects and to obtain valuable advice, guidance, and resources to help them transform these properties into community assets. Next slide, please. So the first opportunity is called Breaking Brownfields. We are sponsoring this with the Urban Land Institute of Philadelphia. For this event, we are looking for government entities or nonprofits with sites in South Jersey to showcase their brownfield redevelopment project to a panel of private sector experts, including real estate developers, environmental attorneys, and consultants. This panel of experts will provide their expert know-how, advice, and industry perspective on how to overcome the challenges to that redevelopment project. And this is not only a great opportunity to get expert feedback on your redevelopment project, but it's also a great opportunity to market your brownfield redevelopment project to a room full of real estate developers and investors. Next slide, please. So you can go ahead, mark your calendars for this. This event will be March 21st, 9 to 12. We might have a venue. I'm not sure what it is. I can let you know, but next slide. So the second opportunity I wanted to talk to you today is about the New Jersey Interagency Work Group Brownfield Collaborative Forum. This will be held in late spring or early summer. Haven't nailed down a date for this yet, but this is a group of about 30 federal and state agencies and developments working together to help New Jersey's communities overcome brownfields challenges. So this forum is an opportunity for a local government or nonprofit to present its brownfields project to an audience of representatives from federal and state agencies and departments. And at this event, the local government or nonprofit will give a presentation of its brownfield site, including the site history, the desire to redevelop the site, and the challenges in doing so. And then at the end of their presentation, the federal and state representatives will provide advice, guidance, suggestions, and resources that could help the local government or nonprofit advance their project to successful completion. Again, this is a great opportunity not only to receive on-the-spot input from a room full of federal and state agencies, it's also an opportunity to establish relationships with these agencies that will be beneficial as you continue to develop your project. And I think we all know the value of having that go-to person. So next slide. This is just a sampling of who's represented at this event. And you might be surprised by the funding available to you for your brownfields projects through the USDA or a creative solution from the Council on Arts. Next slide. So for both of these events I've mentioned, we are looking to focus on and showcase brownfield projects in South Jersey. And I know better than to litigate here where that line is. If you're not sure, just let me know. We'll make a judgment call. But if you are here representing a government entity or a nonprofit and you are interested in showcasing one of your sites, or if you're a consultant and you have a client in the public sector who you think might benefit from one of these events, please contact me as soon as possible. I'll give you more information. We can kind of discuss which might be a better fit for your site. My email is right here, kaylin.bruno@njit.edu. So yeah, please let me know. These are two really great and fun events, and you get some really great feedback. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kaylin. Is there any questions from the audience or online?
No questions online.
All right. Oh, Terry Wesley from EPA. Yeah.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yeah. So I know this is going to be a difficult question, but really, Kaylin, where's that line at? South Jersey. Come on, I'm gonna ask it. Come on. Is it Camden down? I mean, what are we talking about?
So I have some hints on the screen here. If you call it pork roll, you might be in South Jersey. If you have some weird monster as your mascot, that might be a South Jersey thing. I
Okay,
don't know.
thanks for that.
Terry.
Actually, there was one online question.
It's from New Brunswick down.
This is from Joe Hawkwriter. How do you define South Jersey?
Oh, it's all right. We're going there, Joe, and it's not pretty. All right. Well, thank you very much, Kaylin. We are going to move on to our next speaker, NJEDA, Barbara Vadney. Take it away, Barbara.
Great to be here. And I'm going to give you an update on EDA programs, brownfield programs. I did put out a flyer which covers this presentation, and it has the links and the QR code. So you could go to this flyer also that's at the front desk, or you can get it at break from me. Okay, so the New Jersey Brownfields Assistance Center, Kaylin did a great job of covering it. EDA supports the Brownfields Assistance Center at NJIT. The Hazardous Discharge Site Remediation Fund is jointly administered between DEP and EDA. Thank you, Rachel, for that update. And we really look forward to the final economic impact study. That really seems like a significant study. And it's always good to see the success stories and impacts in the community. So we look forward to that publication of that report. The Brownfields Incentive Program, tax incentive program, that's the program I work on, and I'll go over that in a few minutes. And the Brownfields Impact Fund, that's a revolving loan fund supported by the US EPA with loans up to $350,000 currently available. This program supports cleanup activities at brownfield sites to promote redevelopment, and it's available to local governments, for-profit businesses, and not-for-profit organizations. And pre-qualification forms are available on the EDA website. If you have a site in mind, please fill out that form. It only takes a few minutes, and send it to us, and somebody will get back to you. The US EPA Brownfield Planning and Assessment Services. This program is also supported by a grant from the US EPA, and EDA is offering no cost brownfield planning and assessment services around the state. We're working through the details on this program, and we're going to keep you posted on the status of this and updated on our progress. And in the meantime, if you have a project in mind where you want assessment done, please fill an expression of interest form on the EDA website. The Brownfields Redevelopment Incentive Program, it's also called the Tax Incentive Program. This is a new competitive program which will offer a one-time tax credit to developers who have completed a cleanup of a brownfield site. Eligible costs include site investigation, assessment, remediation, asbestos abatement, and demolition. The applicant is awarded the tax credit upon completion of the brownfield cleanup, which will allow for future redevelopment of the site. So this is a 6-year program. It's capped at $300 million in tax awards over 6 years. Typical projects will receive up to 50% of the remediation costs, up to a maximum of $4 million. And in government restricted municipalities such as Trenton, Patterson, and Atlantic City, those are the 3 government restricted municipalities, or qualified incentive tracts, they can receive up to 60% of remediation costs for a maximum of $8 million. So that's an incentive in that area. And like most EDA programs, prevailing wages will be required for this program, and that will be for remedial construction work and construction work, not professional services. But prevailing wages do apply to this program. And also there's a tail of 10 years. Once the project is completed, there'll be a 10-year tail for building services, which is like cleaning services on the property, that they have to be paid prevailing wages also. And the tax credit is transferable. So once the developer receives it, the tax credit, they can either use the tax credit or they can give it to, transfer it one time to another entity, which means they can also sell it to another entity. And it's a one-time transfer. So the status, we have a big win here. We passed the rules at the EDA board. They approved the rules for this program and the program in October, and that's really great news. That's a big win. We're currently preparing an online application. We're developing it. It's being developed by EDA staff. And the next prong is promotion and outreach. And we need to spread the word once the application is developed through professional networks for mediation and redevelopment. We really need your help. It was great during the public listening sessions in September. We sent out a press release and people spread the word, and we had a very good attendance, online attendance at the public listening sessions for the rules, the draft rules in September, and we got public feedback. So that was really an effective way to do it. So we look forward to that support in the future, and we'll be sending out a press release with more details. And if you have any projects that you're thinking about that might work with this tax incentive program, we would really like to talk with you now. We would like to set up a meeting, a virtual meeting. We could set up a virtual meeting very easily to discuss the project and the program details. And since this is a competitive program, we just want you to know that EDA cannot discuss specific projects once the application window has opened. So we would like to hear from you as soon as possible. And you can see me at the break if you have any interest, or if you have a specific project you're thinking about and want to know if tax incentives would work on this project, please feel free to talk with me. Thank you.
Yes, Laura. Here, can you give her a mic, Tony? Yeah, well, just for our friends online. I'll just read the whole thing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Laura Brinkerhoff. Is this a competitive program and time-limited application, or will it be rolling?
No, it's not a rolling. It is a competitive program. So once the window opens, there'll probably be 3 months, 2 or 3 months to respond to it, and then it'll be closed. So it is competitive. There are a lot of resources in the program, so we hope that everybody can get in. And there's eligibility criteria. So the eligibility criteria is like you have to be a brownfield site, you know. And there are other eligibility criteria, such as you need a letter of support from the governing body. And then there's scoring criteria, which will be, so the eligible projects will be scored on different criteria.
I think you also can be an RP.
Oh,
I
yes,
also
you
think you
cannot
can
be
be
a
an-
responsible party. So responsible parties cannot apply for this program, because we don't want to give tax credits to responsible parties, or, you have to not discharged, cause the discharge.
Hey, hi,
Vince.
Barbara.
Hi.
Vince with CCI. A quick question. This program with the incentive, the Brownfield incentive program. When the application process starts, can existing projects come into it, or we have to be starting from scratch when you put in the application?
So that's an interesting question. If there's like further contamination that you need to investigate or remediate, you would be eligible, but we're not paying for previous costs. Okay, we're not paying for previous costs, but going forward, if there's another phase that you're working on, or you found additional contamination that you didn't know, that would be covered, that you haven't done this work. So it's for future work.
Rachel, do we have anything from online?
Yeah, we have a question online. For BRIP, is there evidence that the prevailing wage requirement actually helps make the program work?
Well, most EDA programs are prevailing wages. And that's just our philosophy, is that we want to pay fair wages and prevailing wages. So that you have to cost it out for prevailing wages. Does that answer that?
Yes, thank you, Barbara.
Thanks.
All right. Barbara, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's about 10:35. Let's take a 10-minute break and get back here at 10:45, and we will start with inland flood protection, Vince Mazzei, at about 10:45. Thanks, everybody. All right, everybody, we're back. We are going to be starting up the second half of our show today with Vince Mazzei from the Watershed and Land Management Group. and he'll be speaking with us about inland flood protection remotely. Thank you, Vince. Welcome.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm always happy to talk about what we're doing at the state. There's a lot of good things going on, and a lot of difficult things going on, which is what precipitated, no pun intended, our current rulemaking and what will focus our attention over the coming year or so. So I thought what I would do is kind of run through first, my role and what I've been doing at the state and how this can help with certain things, and then I'm going to walk through a little bit of like what drove us to make some changes to our rulemaking. We had just this Monday was published in the New Jersey Register a rulemaking that would deal with some inland flooding issues, and so I'm going to kind of walk through like how we got there, kind of some of the issues that we've been facing in the state. Now, for 2.5 years, I was Assistant Commissioner for Watershed Land and Management, but in the last month or so, I've been the State Floodplain Administrator. And that's important to FEMA. Now, FEMA, as you know, they administer the National Flood Insurance Program, and that's a voluntary program. So communities throughout the state, including the state of New Jersey, voluntarily agree to meet minimum standards set by the federal government. And of course, the standards that we have in the state tend to be more protective and more stringent than the federal minimum. But there's a bit of a disconnect because not every community, I'm finding out now that not every community is even sure exactly who their floodplain administrator is or what their functions are. And what the function of that is to make sure that all the work, all the permits that are authorized by that community meet minimum federal standards or meet the higher standards that are adopted by the community. So for the state of New Jersey, that means making sure that projects that are owned by the state, administered by the state, DOT projects, things for Treasury, all of that meets the flood hazard rules, which is the higher standard. And at the local level, the local floodplain administrator does the same thing. So let me walk through where we got to with this inland flooding rulemaking that was proposed just a couple of days ago, and I can answer some questions on it. So let's see if I can advance here. All right. So New Jersey is, we're blessed with a lot of water. There's no, you would think there was no downside to that. And it's great when the water stays where it's supposed to, but the water doesn't always stay where it's supposed to. And because of our historic development patterns, a lot of the development that we have in our population centers are along waters, right? Pretty much every town has a stream or a creek or a river running through it because that's why the town was put there. And older development was often established without regard for potential flood risk. And so that's led to some problems because as flooding has gotten worse, the problems that they've encountered in these historic areas are getting worse. What we found over the years, I've been with the state for 34 years and I've been doing, I'm an engineer and I've been working on flood related matters since day one. And what I found is that people often don't understand the risk that they have. They look at a map, they say, well, I'm inside the line, I'm outside the line. And it becomes more of like an exercise of what kind of flood insurance might I need? Or, is there something I can do to not need flood insurance? But it's bigger than that, right? The mapping is a good place to start, but it's not complete. There's not flood maps for every place in the state where there's floodplains. So you can have a floodplain on your site and it's not mapped, and you think you're fine because you go to your lender and they're not requiring you to get flood insurance because it's not on the map. But the flood doesn't know it's supposed to stop at that line on the map. And what we've been seeing over the last few decades is a trend that flooding is the bigger floods are getting here more often, right? We're seeing the 100-year flood, not every 100 years, but we're seeing it every 25 years or whatnot. And I have a few examples of that that I'm gonna show you. So the problem is that our flood mapping is based mostly on past hydrology, past science, and necessarily so, right? If you're creating a flood map, you're looking at the data that you've collected precipitation data or flood data over the last 50 to 100 years, and you're making a map based on the statistics that provides to you, right? But it doesn't account for any changes in precipitation due to climate change. So things have been getting worse, but the mapping doesn't reflect that. As I mentioned, it doesn't even cover all the floodplains. And so as a result, it can underestimate today's actual flood risk. So what really drove us to take action on this was a report that Cornell University had worked on with us, and we had partnered with NOAA to produce. And it focused on two main things. One is that it confirmed that over the last 20 years, there's been increases in extreme precipitation. And the reason why that's important is that if I were designing a stormwater management system today, and I look up what the precipitation is expected for a 24-hour storm, for say the 100-year storm, I'm going to get a certain number of inches of rain. And the problem is that that was based on data that was established in 1999. So it's changed significantly in some cases since 1999, and we expect that it's going to continue changing as a result of climate change over the coming decades. So this is kind of how it plays out, and it's not a pretty picture, because what it's saying is that, you know, since 1999, the 2-year storms increased by as much as 5%, the 10-year by 7%, the 100-year by 15% in some counties. And the trend continues to the end of the century. You could have situations where, like Sussex County, that what today's 100-year rainfall will be 50% more water by the end of the century. So what does a stormwater management system look like if it's handling all this extra water? And we saw with Hurricane Ida, or I should say the remnants of Tropical Storm Ida, what that can do to communities. And I'm going to show some photos. And this is the problem: is more rain means more runoff, right? But it's not a direct relationship. If you get 20% more rain, you don't necessarily get 20% more runoff. Might be more, might be less, depending on the ground cover. Get more runoff, that means you get more flows in rivers, but it's not a direct relationship. And more flow in the rivers means higher flood elevations, but it's very hard to say, well, if a 50% increase in runoff is going to be, you know, make the floodplain do this or that. But we know they're getting bigger, and we found some examples of this which I'll share with you. So, you know, the effects of extreme precipitation and how it's increasing. It's already overtaxed infrastructures under greater stress. It's overwhelming stormwater management systems, increases fluvial flood death, and it increases risk to life and property, because when people are buying property, choosing to occupy a building, determining that what kind of development they want, they should be aware of what kind of risk is associated with development there. So Tropical Storm Ida, which passed through in September of last year, gave us a grim picture of what we believe future flooding is going to look like in the state. I don't know if I live in Hunterdon County, if anybody's familiar. This is that picture there is the ShopRite parking lot on Route 31 in Flemington. And when I saw this photo, I thought, there's no creek or river or stream anywhere near this. So this was all stormwater driven. This was all stormwater runoff from Flemington that made its way to 202, and the piping system along Route 202 couldn't handle it. So it became a river. So Route 202 became a river, and there were fatalities on Route 202 as a result. And so we were seeing that across the state. And when we looked at the mapping and we looked at the aerial extent of the flooding, we found that in general, the floods that we saw were about 3 feet higher than FEMA's 100-year flood elevation that was shown on their maps. And that's 2 feet higher than what we regulate in the state. Because right now today in New Jersey, we say if you're along a river, you use the FEMA map and you add a foot to it, and that becomes your design flood elevation. So here's an example. Here's the Raritan River at Bound Brook, right? And there's a gauge there that shows, has data that they've been collecting for years and years. And you can see on the left side there, that box, you can see that Ida matched the same intensity as Hurricane Floyd in 1999. Hurricane Floyd was a much, much bigger event, but Ida was able to match it. And what's even more, I won't bore you with all the little details of how much, exactly how much it was above. I'm an engineer, so I geek out on this kind of stuff. So forgive me, but the takeaway, the bottom point is the 500-year flood at this point has been exceeded 3 times since 1999. So if you're getting 3 500-year floods in a 23-year period, that's a problem. That means that there's something wrong with the statistics that are based on the mapping. And so if you're buying a piece of property and you're outside the 500-year flood and you think, oh, this is great, I'm never going to get flooded, you don't really have that assurance. So here's another example. This is the Millstone River in Manville. Manville got slammed during Ida. And so here's before Ida, here's during Ida. So you can see the extent of the flooding, that this entire residential subdivision is completely underwater. The water came up to about here. And the reason why I'm showing you this is I'm going to show you the flood map. I lined it up as best as I could so you can use this building here in the top left corner as your guide. And you can see all these houses that were flooded are not shown in the floodplain. So none of these people were required to have flood insurance. They could have had basements. They could have done development there, and no one told them that they needed to get a permit, because how would they have known? They're outside the map, right? And then we saw this all over the place, right? And what this does is it causes flood elevations to go up. So let's say that you have a subdivision, or you're doing a development of some kind, and you expect that the flooding is here, but when in reality the flooding is up here, that's a problem, right? And so we're finding, like I said, that the flooding was about 2 feet higher than we have previously anticipated it. So there's a lot there, and I can't talk too much about the specifics of the proposal because we're in our comment period. But the takeaway is that when you're using mapping to determine your flood elevation in these riverine systems, you would take the mapping and you'd add additional 2 feet above what we do today. If you don't want to use the mapping, because you never are stuck using the mapping, if you don't want to use the mapping, then your option is that you can always calculate the floodplain. But if you calculate the floodplain, you have to use not today's precipitation, or not 1999's precipitation, but actually the anticipated precipitation that we would receive in the year 2100. And so that means bigger floodplains, and that means designing sites that accommodate more flooding, right? So that affects net fill calculations, that affects redevelopment of buildings where your lowest floor maybe is not elevated properly. So there are a lot of ways that this could impact development. It also impacts stormwater management systems, because today, when you're designing a stormwater management system, you're using that data from the National Weather Service, which was based in 1999. So you're really not even designing for today's storm as it is, you're designing for 1999's rain. So what the rulemaking does is it says, well, you have to design for two different intensities. Today's adjusted intensity, using that Cornell study and bringing the data up to today, and then also using the 2100 precipitation. So that means designing a stormwater BMP to meet today's runoff and future runoff. So the 2-year storm, the 10-year storm, the 100-year storm has to be matched for both cases. And so what does that mean? It means BMPs might have to be a bit larger. It means that piping systems might have to be a bit larger. As an engineer, I'm fully confident that engineers can engineer anything, and so we can do this. We can adapt to this, but it's obviously going to have an impact and on certain developments. And once the comment period's done, I'd be happy to talk to folks about specific projects that they've got and how this might affect them. So I wanted to make sure I left some time for questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Vince. I don't know if we have any questions in the room or online.
No questions online.
All right, I'd like to just have a quick discussion, Vince, about, I know that there is oftentimes some confusion about development in a tidal floodplain and development in an inland floodplain. And people will hear, oh, we're going to raise the elevation in a tidal floodplain, but how that's not possible in an inland floodplain. So if you could just sort of add a little color to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Bill. So when Governor Murphy signed the executive order back in 2020, that set us on this path of adjusting our land use rules to account for climate change, we developed like a 1,100-page rule proposal that covered everything from inland flooding to coastal flooding. And the dynamics are very different between coastal flooding and inland flooding. In inland flooding, you have the possibility of flash floods, right? So making sure that people have a way to get in and out of buildings during a flood is very important, because the flood could come within minutes. During Ida, the road that I live on was destroyed, My home is not in a floodplain because that would be too ironic. If my home was in a floodplain. So my home and the road in front of it were fine, but both ends of the road that I live on were destroyed by Ida, and we couldn't get to and from the house for 2 or 3 days. And my neighbors had literally no time to react. They showed me a video of the beginning of the storm, and within 15 minutes it was in the yard, and 15 minutes later it was up to their door, and 15 minutes later it was up to the second floor window of their house. So you have that dynamic in fluvial systems that you don't have along the coast. The coastal flooding, you know when it's coming, right? You know, we all look at the weather, we all get the reports. Most of the coastal communities are pretty savvy about early warning systems and making sure that there's evacuation plans in place, so you can get out of town before the flood hits. So there's that the difference between the fluvial and coastal when it comes to public safety, but then the structures themselves, the buildings that are being built, whereas in fluvial areas, the increases in flooding that we're seeing are driven by increases in precipitation. That's not the case along the coast. Along the coast, we see a slow rise in the sea level that by the end of the century has a likelihood of being between 2 and 5 feet above current mean high water line. So that means flood elevations will be between 2 and 5 feet above current flood elevations. So you're building something today in a coastal community, and you're setting the floor of your building at the BFE that's shown on the FEMA map. By the end of the century, that could be 2 to 5 feet below the flood elevation. And so what we did was, in order to combat the inland flooding piece of it, we broke off that piece of the rulemaking, put it out first. And so this current rulemaking is sort of a surgical change to the rules. And then the rest of it, we anticipate proposing in the spring, and that would deal with all the coastal flooding and the changes to the coastal communities that we anticipate.
Great, thank you, Vince. Anybody else? Any questions? Nope. All right, Vince, we appreciate your time. Great information, and maybe we'll have you back in another quarterly roundtable to follow up on some of the things you discussed today.
I'd be happy to, and I'll be there in person next time.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Take care. All right, next up is our very own Frank McLaughlin, live and in person, giving us an update on the Community Collaborative Initiative.
Thanks, Bill. Hello, everybody. Hopefully we're going to be increasing our in-person participation in 2023. It's nice that we're increasing the amount of in-person gatherings, and I know personally I look forward to more of that in 2023. But thank you to Anthony and Tyrone for allowing us to have this hybrid situation. My name is Frank McLaughlin. I'm a manager in the Office of Brownfield and Community Revitalization. And there's Tony interrupting me again, Bill. Anyway, for people who know Tony, that's not unusual. So I have a program update for everybody. So 2013, we started an innovative initiative called the Camden Collaborative Initiative, and where we intentionally went to the communities to work on our mutual interests across all environmental challenges and opportunities. It had grown, that initiative had grown out of our office. At that time it was called the Office of Brownfield Reuse. And our office, through the Brownfield Development Area Program at the time, intentionally went to communities to work with them in their neighborhood on their brownfields projects. And the Community Collaborative Initiative built upon that model of government going to the places and the people that are challenged with these brownfield sites and other environmental issues. We were very fortunate. The Community Collaborative Initiative became a program in 2015 with the addition of Trenton Perth Amboy, and in 2017 Bayonne, and in 2019 retired Commissioner Catherine McCabe expanded to 12 cities. And so just very recently, the Community Collaborative Initiative is going to be moving out of the Brownfields office and going to the 7th floor under a program that was developed about a year and a half ago called Community Investment and Economic Revitalization. So it's a new program with an Assistant Commissioner, Elizabeth Dragon. And so that program will be taking the Community Collaborative Initiative forward starting now. So we're hoping that that new program will embrace how we've done business, both in the Brownfields office and with the Community Collaborative Initiative over the last, well, the Brownfields office, 20 years since we started the Brownfield Development Area Program in 2003. And then the Community Collaborative Initiative was formalized in 2015 after the Camden Collaborative Initiative pilot was successful in 2013. So, first I just wanted to thank, my staff and the liaisons who've been working hard in these 12 cities for the past 3 years, and some of these cities longer than that. So I'd like to recognize Jamila, who was our liaison in Trenton. Thanks, Jamila. Vince Calaguire, I'd like to thank him because of his efforts in Salem and Paulsboro. Thank you, Vince. Tony Finley, who wears many hats as well as interrupts many people. Tony was our Community Collaborative liaison in Newark, and also the Brownfield Development Manager in many BDAs. Thank you, Tony. I don't know who's online because I can't see that. So, but we have staff in 12 cities, and I wanted to thank them as well, but I can't do so because they're not here. And Bill was a liaison in Perth Amboy before he and ran our office. So obviously, thank you to Bill in Perth Amboy. So what do we know about community collaboration going forward? Well, that it'll be under the direction of Elizabeth Dragon and Art Zanfini, a bureau chief for Elizabeth. Actually, Elizabeth and Artie did a lot of work with me in Camden. They were both in the compliance and enforcement program prior to their to the new program. So they know what it takes to serve these communities and the challenges of serving overburdened communities. They are interviewing for liaison positions now. So we understand that the program will be up and running in the beginning of 2023, and the Brownfields office will work closely with that program. So I just want to thank, my colleagues at EPA and some in the consulting world for a successful run with this Community Collaborative Initiative, building upon the successful run we had in the Brownfields office. So there's going to be changes to the Brownfields office, but I'm smart enough not to scoop my boss, so I'm going to let him. This is a change here, but change brings also new opportunities. So Bill will talk about those in a few moments.
One question, Frank. Are they going to keep the same name when they move it up to Elizabeth Group? It's still going to be called CCI?
We don't know
That's
yet.
my understanding is they will. It's tied to several other issues, especially within some of the EDA funding programs use the term CCI, so I believe the name will be staying the same. The other thing, like Frank said, we will be working closely with this group. We will maintain a footprint in these communities that we have been in through the Brownfields. All these communities that we work in through CCI have Brownfields, and we will still continue to maintain our presence in those communities. Like Frank said, working closely with the CCI group. So we look forward to seeing how this thing goes moving forward. But, you know, we will still be maintaining a presence, a very active presence in the communities through the Brownfields program.
We've also been told they're likely to continue with the same cities that were part of the collaborative in our office. So that's our understanding as of today. So I see JR out there. So the Trentons of the world, the Camdens of the world, the Salems of the world. That's our understanding is that it will continue, but they are actively interviewing liaisons now for those positions.
Do you want to open up for questions, Frank?
Yeah, Janine, do you have a question or comment? Oh. Any comments?
We have a question from Joe Hawkrider.
Oh, hi, Joe.
What does the new division with an assistant commissioner do for Brownfields? Why break up OBR?
Well, you're going to have to ask people who get higher salaries than I do. I do not know that, but what I do know is that the Brownfields office has been in these same community collaborative cities for, well, 20 years instead of 10 years. So I expect, I know there'll be a strong Brownfields presence continuing in these communities. And I expect, I hope, that there will be a strong community collaborative initiative, which is more of a cross-program initiative, again, working on mutual environmental challenges and opportunities. So I expect to work with, and Bill expects to work with Joe in Perth Amboy and other great places where he works going forward.
Any other questions?
JR Capasso from Trenton.
Yeah, why wouldn't I? So it doesn't sound like you've been told an awful lot. And I mean, I hadn't really heard of it. I guess some rumor mill stuff. So so is EDA still footing the bill for this, or is this something the department is now funding?
So we had an agreement with EDA when the Community Collaborative Initiative expanded to 12 cities in 2019. That agreement ended in 2021. So we had a 2-year agreement with EDA. So the answer is, of course, we work with EDA closely in many programs, of course, HDSRF and others, because we have mutual interest in redevelopment of brownfields, of course. But no, EDA is not funding the new Community Collaborative Initiative.
So this looks like there are higher level people now associated with the program. Should I take that to mean it's going to be bigger and better?
Well, you are right. It is at a higher level, JR, than me. So, and Bill. So you are right about that. That's our hope. That is our hope. Yes, that's the expectation.
The new program has reached out to all the cities, JR, for they're going to be having a conversation with every city that we're currently engaged with.
Okay.
So there was a reach out to each of the mayors last month, and they're Elizabeth Dragon and Art Zanfini are starting to meet with municipal leaders now. But they are, again, building the program now from the ground up, interviewing folks across the department for liaison positions. Janine.
Yeah, where do you see EPA's role in all this now? Like, what direction should we now?
Well, we know where our Brownfields role is with EPA, right? Community Collaborative Initiative role, I hope there's conversation soon. We have, Bill and I have briefed leadership many times on our close working relationship with EPA, and that you have a similar program formerly called Community Driven Solutions, but the name might have been tweaked more recently. I meant to ask you and Terry before I got up here, but so yes, we have briefed them both on our strong working relationship with you guys, and then you have a similar program in Region 2 that we were working with you in a number of these cities and wanting to expand our work in those cities with you guys, lockstep. So we did brief the management of that. You're welcome. Terry.
Thank you, kind sir. Just to follow up on Shanine's question. So I would imagine this is sort of the first official announcement of this that's taken place. is there an expectation in the near future that is between, say, like EPA and DEP to have this conversation with upper management and the new folks that are coming on board?
That's the expectation,
Yeah,
Terry. Yes.
we could talk about that, Terry.
Sure.
All right,
Anything
anybody else
Rachel,
online?
or are we good?
We have another question from Joe Hawkwriter.
Oh, follow-up. Well, is he become an attorney now too?
What do former enforcement people bring to the table?
What do the former enforcement people bring to the table? That's a good question. Well, the enforcement program also was reorganized, and the enforcement in the distinct medias like air, water, land are in those programs now. Like water enforcement is in the water program now. So I don't know the answer to that question, but in addition to enforcement experience, Elizabeth and Artie have done some on the ground work in places like
The new program is dedicated to community investment and economic revitalization. So there is certainly a nexus between some of the work that the CCI program was doing that was, outside of the Brownfields arena. So, that's there. I'm sure that there will be, value added from this group to this endeavor. All right. So if we don't have any other questions, we are actually going to keep Frank at the podium, and he is going to talk about his next topic.
Well, we're going to invite someone who's
with
a little
Katie
easier on the eyes
Hogue.
to the podium too. This is Katie Hogue. Katie is works for our office, and Katie is a recent grad in a master's program at the University of Pennsylvania, and we're going to introduce a project that we have been working on for the past few months, and I'll introduce the project, and then I'll have Katie do the difficult work of explaining what we're finding and the importance of that finding. So there's Katie and myself, and we are at a rain garden in Camden, New Jersey. As Bill is fond of saying, I almost got fired over this project in 2008, 2009.
True.
Not the only time I was almost fired at DEP.
Also true.
This rain garden is in the poorest census tract in the poorest city in New Jersey. So it's in a waterfront south neighborhood in Camden, where I was working as a Brownfield development area project manager back in 2008, 2009. But this was outside the Brownfield development area. Therein lies the rub why I almost had my cubicle moved out of the 401 building and back home. So this beautiful picture just taken like 3 weeks ago before all the leaves fell off the trees and bushes, right? This was believe it or not, this was the first brownfields to green infrastructure project in the state of New Jersey. And so earlier this year, well, previous to that, just recently, the Murphy administration got back into the regional greenhouse gas initiative. It's a regional initiative throughout the northeastern part of the U.S. and we get proceeds from a carbon tax within our region. And Governor Murphy decided that we would use some of that money to fund carbon sequestration projects across the state. And there was a, look at that, I don't know how to use it. So we put together, this is earlier in 2022, we put together an RFP and a grant application, and it's $15 million worth of money in 2022. We think that funding is either going to be the same or greater going forward for what we call natural and working lands strategy of protecting or enhancing lands for climate resiliency, specifically blue and green carbon sequestration. Blue carbon sequestration would be tidal and wetlands carbon sequestration. Green would be the unflooded areas that Vince was talking about earlier, parks, woodlands, and places like that. So I'm not going to go into the whole grant because unfortunately the application closed in September, but we expect this to be out there every year. And Katie and I are on a working group for one of 6 of these working groups. The working groups are not on there. That is about the about the application, and I can provide links. So Terry, you don't have to write you don't have to get a cramp writing. There are 6 areas that we're looking to, working groups within DEP that we're looking to store carbon. And we were fortunate to make a strong argument that urban lands can be great storage places for carbon. And I know Camden put a grant in for a number of urban forests and park projects for this grant. But look, going forward, we feel like, well, we're making a strong argument that urban lands have more co-benefits with respect to climate resiliency than other projects. But that's, of course, from our urban bias that we have in our office. But like the co-benefits at this project, the rain garden project that was done over 10 years ago was done for stormwater management because of chronic flooding in that community. I mean, so we removed 12 tanks, removed a lot of contaminated soil to create a stormwater management element in a neighborhood with chronic flooding. So that was the original purpose of that. Plus it was a blighted site, of course, not only contaminated, but blighted and attracting other illegal activities at the time. So there has multiple co-benefits, which we were advertising in our urban working group. So in addition to cleaning up a site, taking away a blighted site, this site manages over 800,000 gallons of stormwater every year. 800,000 gallons that were going into basements and flooding streets in that exact neighborhood. There are houses adjacent to the site immediately to the north. And but in addition, we didn't know this at the time over 10 years ago, but this site is also storing a lot of carbon. It was a 0.4 acre asphalt lot with a building and 12 tanks in the ground. 0 carbon. And I'm going to pass it over to Katie to talk about some of the things we found recently.
So in this slide, you can see the 10-year difference between when Waterfront South Rain Gardens was first installed and the tree plantings were done. And then just a couple weeks ago when me and Frank visited and took some measurements. So we went out and we wanted to determine the amount of carbon that's been sequestered by the trees on the site. And to do that, we had to get an estimate. There's not like a set in stone method to calculate how much carbon that trees sequester, but a lot of universities and other places that do research have put together a formula that's pretty accurate to estimate for trees. There's not one yet for like shrubs and ground cover, but so for trees, you have to determine the total green weight of the tree, then the dry weight, then the weight of the carbon, and then you get the carbon dioxide that's been sequestered. And I can like provide those formulas if anyone's interested and the links. So we went out and we got the diameter breast height of all the trees in the park. And also we did the height of the tree. That's what that picture is. Like you hold up a yardstick and then measure the distance from you to the tree. Yeah, Frank was good at recording all the the measurements. He was very helpful. So yeah, after we got the measurements and I did all the calculations, so just the standalone trees in the park, like not including the shrubs and the ground cover, it was an estimated 63.06 tons of CO2 that were sequestered by the trees, which is a lot. And to contextualize that, 1 ton of carbon dioxide is 23,000 miles in the average car, which is a trip around the world. It charges 121,643 smartphones. And then if you multiply that by the 63 tons of carbon, that's 7.6 million smartphones that have been charged just by this one small park in Waterfront South. And this is really amazing, and it's an excellent example of how brownfield remediation and green infrastructure keep climate pollutants out of the atmosphere while improving the quality of our resources, because as stated before, this site was built for stormwater management, and also beautifying the community. And while me and Frank were there, we saw a lot of people who would just like walk through the park on like wherever they were going, and that has to be really nice, and especially in an area that was once like blighted. Yeah, and if you guys have any questions.
I want to note that the 63 tons and the, I don't know, 7 or 8 million smartphone charges, again, the site was asphalt and a building. It now has healthy topsoil. There is a lot of carbon sequestration in the soil that we're going to provide estimates for. And also within the rain gardens itself, there are ground cover, shrubs. There are not good equations for those, but we can provide estimates. So the number is even higher than what we could defend now. And with that, with this gas station, we're able to go to this working group and hopefully up the chain of command to highlight the importance of urban carbon sequestration and all the co-benefits we get from doing carbon sequestration projects in urban areas.
It's also important to note that the greatest amount of carbon sequestered in trees is in the younger stages of growth. So by building a park in an urban area, you go from 0 carbon sequestration to immediate, like a lot of uptake of carbon. While like if we're just focusing on preserving forests that are already standing, it's not going to sequester very much new carbon. So for a strategy like this, where we're looking for like ways to get more pollutants out the atmosphere, focusing on urban lands can be really helpful.
Katie, what was the average height of a tree? One of the trees that you measured?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but
Well,
I
our
would say,
highest tree was what, 40 feet?
yeah, our highest was around 40. Our shortest was around 10 feet. I think most of them were probably falling in like the late 20s, early 30s.
There were about 6 large tree species planted for diversity. I mean, and I've been there during the growing season, and there are a lot of butterflies, a lot of bird use of this small site. And one of our tree species needs to be replanted because they planted ash trees, which now have stopped growing because of the emerald ash borers. So
Yeah, they're sick.
So yeah, I mean, we have sycamore trees that are 40 feet high, Tony.
But also all the trees there are native species, and we also seen squirrels nest in the trees and stuff as proof that wildlife is using it.
All right, any questions?
Great presentation, though. And I think I prefer Katie over you. Conversation. So in terms of this is a beautiful project. When you talk about the diversity of the trees, I was going to ask, are there any sort of fruit trees as part of this?
Yeah, there's trees that have berries on them. There's hawthorns. What was the other one? There was one more. Hackberries, hawthorns. So there's a few berry wielding trees that are good for native birds and stuff.
Great. And then from the science side of things, between deciduous and evergreens, is there a preference for, say, carbon sequestration, being able to do more when there are seedlings growing, to maturity?
Yeah, so there is a preference. There's not like a huge amount of research done on it, but generally trees that grow faster in early stage growth grow larger and have bigger areas of leaf cover, sequester more carbon. It's mostly just about the size of the woody stems, and that same thing goes for shrubs as well.
Is there a lot of maintenance associated with this park? Do you know?
Yes, fortunately, the Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority owns the site because the intention was a stormwater management project initially. So yes, that for rain gardens and even open space, right? Having O&M money going forward is important, right? Because many smaller nonprofits or public institutions struggle with maintaining open space and rain gardens. We're having discussions about a stormwater management fee in Camden to maintain our large inventory of rain gardens there. But this one is maintained by the Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority, and we have a Power Core program in Camden, and we've used our Power Core members to maintain these rain gardens through the Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority for this site specifically.
Thank you.
Any questions online, Rachel? Good. Okay. Yeah, no, it's exciting to figure out new ways to leverage brownfields, right? And this was one of the things that really hasn't had a lot of coverage yet. And, we've talked about stormwater management on brownfields and solar energy generation on brownfields and open space and health benefits generated from brownfields and urban heat islands and all that other stuff, but the actual carbon sequestration in urban centers, is something that could make a difference. So we thought it was interesting to highlight this and maybe generate some interest in other people thinking about it as we move forward on other projects. So thank you, Frank and Katie. So next up is me. I'm going to give a quick update on some of the things happening in the Office of Brownfield and Community Revitalization. Frank already mentioned the CCI separation, but we are planning on doing some other interesting things with some of the people. Tony will have some additional time perhaps for Brownfield's work and some of our other staff as well. So we are going to be opening up the Brownfield Development Area Program for the first time in about 13 years. It's a long time, 13 years. So we've had discussions with our management and have been putting together a plan to open up our Brownfield Development Area Program. So for those of you who don't know what that is, we have about 31 Brownfield Development Areas in the state. Some of the benefits of having what it means is that we take applications from communities who have multiple brownfields, mostly that are contiguous to each other, and we start and we think about how do we leverage those bigger properties. So if we can make a 0.4 acre site and have carbon sequestration in Camden, what are the potential of having a 0.4 acre site next to a 10 acre site, next to a 20 acre site, next to a 40 acre site, where now we have, 70 acres of land that could be used for something else and be productive again, and also perhaps serve some of the other uses that we've talked about, the stormwater, the solar, the carbon, the open space, the health benefits. So the Brownfield Development Area Program was developed to do that, to treat several contiguous brownfield sites as one big project and leverage the benefits of doing so. Is it easier to do the cleanup? Is it easier to do the groundwater investigation? And certainly after you do all those things, does it make the property much more marketable because now you have a large footprint, a large plot of land that can certainly be used for many other things greater than several small plots of land. The HDSRF program that Rachel mentioned earlier allows us to give an additional $2 million worth of funding.
Yep, BDA communities can receive $5 million a year as opposed to $3 million. So it's the $3 million plus an additional $2 million.
And one of the key things there is that we, many of the money that we give out in HDSRF is for remedial investigation. But if you are part of a brownfield development area, that also opens the door for you to have remedial action money. So actually money to clean up the site in addition to paying for the remedial investigation. It allows 3/4 of the cost of the remedial action to be covered, while 100% of the remedial investigation would be covered. So,
and one comment about that, BDA communities are not limited by the end use like non-BDA communities are. So where we have these specific remedial action grants for affordable housing, recreation, conservation, or renewable energy, for BDA communities, it does not matter what the end use is, you can get 75% for your remedial action.
Excellent point. So this is a pretty big deal for us, and we will be making a more formal announcement, I would say, in the next couple months about the final number of BDAs, but it could be up to 5 we are considering. And, also the BDA allows you to have a project manager from my office assigned to the project to help you, the redeveloper, the city, both, with the many, many hurdles that we all know come along for the ride with brownfield redevelopment. If this was easy, it would be done already, right? So we do the help from the brownfields coordinator from my office is also a huge benefit for keeping these projects on track and helping to identify hurdles early for the redeveloper and the community. So we're pretty excited about this new development, and we will be giving more information as it develops. It is a competitive process that a community would submit an application to my office, and we would go through that process and select the projects that we felt had the most greatest outcomes, that most beneficial for the communities and for the state. So we look forward to giving more information about that in the next couple months, but certainly an exciting and timely development for the Office of Brownfield and Community Revitalization. We're looking forward to working with some new communities, partners at EPA, of course, and doing some transformative change. All right. Next up.
Any questions?
Oh, any questions? Yes, sorry. I tried to avoid it, I guess, inadvertently. But seriously, any questions, anybody?
No, but there is one comment from Joe Hawkrider. He's telling everyone that he's on vacation, yet these meetings are so valuable, and he's here. He's attended while he's on vacation.
He's on vacation, but he's here.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe. We appreciate your attendance and your enthusiasm. Anybody else?
We're good.
All right. Next up, maybe perhaps the one you've all been waiting for, dirty dirt. Fun to say, hard to address. So Pete Kelledy is going to give us a presentation about alternative fill opportunities with orphan dirty dirt piles. Pete?
Thank you, Bill. And thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Tyrone, for putting up with me, because I revised this slideshow, I don't know, about 5 times since last Thursday. Joining me is Dave Samba. Dave? There he is.
I'm here. I just turned my camera on.
Yeah.
Hey, Pete. Hello.
Hey, Dave. So we're with the Bureau of Coastal and Land Use Enforcement. Next slide. Just real quick, I'm a region supervisor out of our Trenton office. We cover basically central and southwestern New Jersey. Dave is out of our Chester office. He's a supervisor up there. That's basically the northern tier, including the Highlands. And then we also have a Toms River office that covers basically the Atlantic coastal region of the state. This slide is usually at the tail end of our presentations, but I wanted to put it here just to show you, where we're from. And I also want to point out that more than any of the other enforcement programs at DEP, we are complaint driven. We call them incidents, and we get about 1,000 a year. People calling into the DEP hotline or using the app, and we basically have to check each one out, see how bad it is, where it is, all kinds of things. Next slide. So we enforce, what do we enforce? We enforce all the land use statutes and the rules that go with them, freshwater wetlands, flood hazard area, and then all the coastal ones and the Highlands statute. I've spent the bulk of my time over the years with the first two, freshwater wetlands and flood hazard area type violations. And those are primarily in the inland parts of the state. We also have, no shortage of coastal area cases, waterfront development. And, one of the things was I didn't have a whole lot of time, I guess, to put this together. And I only saw the title on the agenda, Alternative Fill Dirty Dirt Opportunities. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, opportunities are really, we're hoping to, leverage. So we run into dirty dirt issues more and more. It wasn't something that we had to deal with all that often until probably 10 or 15 years ago, where people started questioning the quality of fill that we would come across. As you can imagine.
Let me interrupt you really quick, because I think that maybe we've done a disservice to our audience by not really defining what we mean by dirty dirt. And to give a quick, so there are many piles throughout the state that are illegally dumped on properties, and they are usually somewhat contaminated, not terribly contaminated, but they are there and we have no way to move them. Oftentimes the responsible party is either not viable or we don't know who they are. So we just call them dirty dirt orphan piles, and we're, that's sort of the basis of this. So sorry about
that. Bill, did you coin that term, or was that somebody else?
Dirty dirt?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not coin it.
Yeah. So that euphemism kind of stuck. I don't know. But it's kind of silly, but at the same time, it does describe it pretty well.
And ironically, Pete and Bill, these dirty dirt piles always seem to wind up in our jurisdictional areas. So that's the nexus with land use enforcement, that they wind up in wetlands or floodplains or coastal areas. And now we need to deal with it. We need to restore these violations, and we can't do that without a lot of legwork to move this material to the appropriate facilities or landfills or whatever. But cost always gets in the way. So,
and that's the next series of slides. I kind of want to illustrate some of those cases, but yeah, easily, quadruples the cost. Like we had in one case that you're going to see, it ended up costing $300,000 to truck. It wasn't even that much, like maybe it was 3,000 cubic yards of slightly contaminated material. Instead of just digging it up and trucking it away somewhere else, it had to go to a landfill, and would have cost maybe $75,000, ended up costing $300,000. So, and that's, that's
one more
prohibitive.
Thing to build on what you guys are saying is that, in the oldest tradition, right, we fill the low spot, right, fill the mosquito areas, and some of that stuff, although it's illegal, is still going on. And that's what's happening with these illegal piles. And to tie into what Vince Mazzei was talking about this morning, sadly, oftentimes those piles or those low spots that are getting filled in illegally are near our inland waterways, where we don't need to raise the elevation of the land, because then it just displaces an area where floodwaters can go. So it becomes even multiple reasons about why these piles need to be removed and find a new home.
Okay, so the next slide kind of illustrates where we were. This site was first investigated about 20 years ago. They filled in, 2,000-3,000 cubic yards in the floodway of the Passaic River, and it took forever for us to get a resolution, partly because the Flood Hazard Area Control Act enforcement provisions were kind of weak until the Environmental Enforcement Enhancement Act was was passed by the legislature in 2007. Before that, it was really tough to get people to do things. And as soon as that was passed, we issued an administrative order with a penalty assessment. And then, within a few years, we had an agreement with the owner. This is in Chatham, New Jersey. And about 10 years ago, we had the ACO agreement. Part of that was a restoration plan. They removed the fill and replanted it. And as you can see, within a few years, it was completely naturalized. We were just out there a few months ago, and you really can't even see anything because the vegetation's grown in so well. But the main thing here was no soil contamination issues arose at any time, and the restoration proceeded without any complications. So that was the good thing about this one. But a lot, if we had the case like this today, I don't know. It looks the site is kind of sketchy. Dumpsters and garbage trucks and things like that. So it might be a completely different animal today. So let's go to the next one. And this site in Rockaway revealed the issue and really set us back for years and years. Not just because of the litigation, and then there was litigation between the owners and a third party, but we inspected it back in 2004, and we saw a whole bunch of material being pushed around, including solid waste inspectors were out there as well. They sampled, they found low levels of PAHs, and that precluded normal removal and disposal, and had to be disposed of at a landfill. And I know I talked to Bill about this, but there were no brownfields projects in that part of the state. I don't know if that's still the case, Bill.
I'm not sure right now, Pete, but yeah, nothing active that I can think of up there.
That's the thing,
We have a couple of things that are coming up in areas like Jersey City.
Right. So that's the thing, there's most of the brownfield sites are in the more, urban areas. So anyway, we ended up getting this, go to the next slide. We ended up with an agreement finally. And they did remove, 3,180 cubic yards of material. There was a lot of complications with this one. That area that you see where the fill was removed from wasn't even their property. They had pushed fill onto another property, which happened to be owned by Jersey City MUA, which was part of their watershed properties upstream of their reservoir. So we did get this slightly contaminated material out of there, and it got trucked to Kingsland landfill. But like I was saying earlier, the cost of remediation would have been probably less than $100,000, but it ended up costing $300,000. So yeah, it's successful now, but go to the next slide. I think maybe one more. Yeah, and that's how it looked last summer. It's naturalizing, and that's kind of how it's going to be. The landowner has no plans to do anything out there. It's by the way, it was all within the floodway of the Rockaway River and the riparian zone, which is 300 feet here. Next slide.
And Pete, one other thing, think about it, was 16 to 17 years to resolve that by going through the appropriate testing protocols and finding a facility, trucking it off. And that is unfortunately not that uncommon.
It ate up attorneys. There was, I think, 3 separate consultants. I mean, it just, it's really, I actually never thought it was going to get resolved, but The next one I just wanted to briefly mention was the granddaddy of them all is a site in Wayne, right along the banks of the Pompton River. It's about a 11 or 12 acre site. It's been was a sand and gravel pit, we think, back in the 40s and 50s. And at some point, Topsoil Depot was born, and they brought in material that would be screened, and they would sell the topsoil. The rest of it, the screenings, which was probably mostly rocks, just piled up on the site starting in the late 70s. And next slide. 30 years later, this aerial doesn't really do justice. Some of the piles there are like 60 to 80 feet higher than above the river level. Here's another complicated case. At one point in the 90s, if you see over on the right, kind of get a flavor of the site. That gray stuff is KFN. And for a while in the 90s, Solid Waste gave the go-ahead for beneficial reuse. And for about a year and a half, 2 years, and that's a byproduct from Markel Paper's recycling operation. And it contains low levels of PCBs and dioxin. So they were, in 2007, actually, when that picture was taken, they were actively removing it and taking it to a landfill. And Markel was paying for it. But the owner stopped and basically walked away from the site, a few years later. So there's still about 30,000 yards entombed in the site. We think there's about 300,000 yards of material in the floodway here. And if you know this area along the border of Wayne and Pequannock, it's extremely flood prone. And right now we have some hope that the new owners will follow through on their promises, and they're going through some regulatory requirements to establish a Class B recycling facility. And within, it's going to take 10, 15 years, at least the bulk of that floodplain is going to be restored. They're going to reprocess the material. We'll see. I'll be long retired when that happens. Next slide. Here is a nice little success story from recent times. This is the Harley Cemetery, also in Camden. It's on the banks of the Cooper River there. So on the left, you see what it looked like in 2006, and then 12 years later, when we came upon it, we got a complaint called in, and we investigated. We found what looked to be kind of like a rogue operation. The place seemed to be kind of loosely managed. So somebody, maybe the superintendent, maybe somebody else, was having fill brought in and pushed out towards the river and into the river too. And of course, it was slightly contaminated. So what do we do? I got an email from Bill Lindner one day, next slide, that there was a Brownfields project not too far away, a landfill that was undergoing capping and eventual redevelopment into a solar project. The cemetery management decided that to go with using their own equipment. They had a couple of small dump trucks, and little by little, they were able to, over a period of about a year and a half, they trucked about 7,000 or 8,000 cubic yards of material along the river there that they had placed, and they trucked it over to the landfill. And I think it was more like on like, because I don't think the contaminants were all that high. Just go back to the previous slide. If you see on the bottom right there, that black material, that's what we're contending with right now, because that's not asphalt millings. It is actually ground up roof shingles, and it goes for about they placed it down on like a path or a driveway, and it goes for close to 1,000 feet, 20 feet wide. It's a lot of material, and we're still grappling with that part of it. So I don't know, maybe there was a Brownfields project that would take something like that. It would be nice. Then we could basically close this out within a few years. Let's go forward to the next site. Next one. Another more recent case. It's on the Camden waterfront. If you go back to the previous slide, it's right at Cooper's Point. It's the old Camden ship repair site. They repaired ships there for about 150 years, and it's a contaminated site. And it's undergone some site remediation in the last 10 or 15 years. Go to the next. But then a new owner came along in 2018, and despite being warned by Frank McLaughlin that they need to get permits before they do anything, and they need to follow through with the site remediation, they thought that all they're going to have to do is cap the site, and then they brought in, I don't know, up to 90,000 cubic yards and piled it up. So presented an immediate problem. We were like, what the heck is this? And we negotiated an ACO with the owner, and they were supposed to do sampling and characterize this fill material, give us a restoration plan, and remove a certain volume. They've done none of that, unfortunately. Go to the next slide. In fact, we found that they even filled a little bit more of some tidal area down there on the bottom left. So we're not really sure that this is contaminated or slightly contaminated, but it could be. But it's a lot of material, and a lot of it's got to be removed. We're actually in court right now, and they're trying to sell this to another developer. So I should be hearing something from our legal folks as to what's going on here.
Hey, Pete, just in the interest of time, I'm running behind schedule a little bit.
I know.
I was wondering if you had, we had discussed maybe having a map of some of the piles that are located throughout the state. Do we have that?
Yeah, Bill, I didn't have time to do that.
Oh, no worries.
We have a list.
Yes.
We've compiled a list of 40 to 50 sites. Some of them we're not sure about, that we kind of just threw everything on a list that we think there's a potential. Some of them are confirmed. Some of them are just potential, sketchy sites. We don't know where the fill came from. Some of them are pretty large. Some of them are pretty small, but.
Or in cases, Pete, where solid waste enforcement issued an NOV, maybe there was commingled C&D and soil fill that was brought on. We don't have analytics, but we can be, it stands to reason that it's going to be a problem soil.
Yep.
So that's on our list as well.
Yeah. So
good, Pete.
Flip forward to, there's one more site I wanted to cover, because this one is, another one where we have confirmed that there are contaminants in the soil, and it's in an area that's, supposed to be pristine. Go to the next one. you know, you drive by a site like this and you think, it's just some driveway going back in the woods, but go to the next one. There's actually a site in rural Hunterdon County where, you know, it's like 25 acres of mostly wooded property. About a third of it's mapped as potential wetlands. And there's a trout maintenance category 1 stream flowing through there. That means there's a 300-foot riparian zone. You know, sampling confirmed contaminants. This material, the property owners wanted 6 to 10 truckloads to fix their access trail, and their grandson found an ad on Facebook Marketplace offering free fill. And they called them, and I guess the people weren't around, and suddenly there were 50 to 100 truckloads of material. Go to the next slide. And as you can see, there was solid waste commingled in there, and sampling revealed metals, PAHs, and, you know, this is one of those sites, not a real lot of fill, but it's contaminated. And, you know, solid waste is the lead on this one, but I'd still like to find a place to take this, like a brownfield site. Dave, you've dealt with this one too. It's
yes, yeah, and of course, yes.
It came from Newark, a couple of construction sites.
Yeah, there was I think it was an infrastructure project in the center of Newark, and then, you know, the property owners are always gonna, you know, raise a roadblock that, okay, it's been sampled, okay, we paid for that, but now it's time to figure out where it goes, and now it's time to transport and pay money to do that, and disposal fees, and this is generally where we run into the roadblock that takes years to get through. If there was a receiving site in the Brownfield world, at least we could check that box and get a little momentum there. But we understand, given this proximity to Brownfield, it's probably not that close.
Yeah. Although it's not that far from, say, you know, Phillipsburg and places like that. So I don't know. That would be a possibility. I just wanted to jump down to the last slide. The next one. Yep, it's dirty dirt. I like to brag about our accomplishments with this slide because, you know, over the years we were able to get a lot of stuff, a lot of wetlands and flood hazard areas and coastal areas restored to the tune of like a 15-year period. We were able to get about 1,000 acres restored and preserved. So that's the ultimate goal with our program, is to, you know, take enforcement actions and get restoration and, you know, restore to the resource.
No, it's good stuff, Pete. You know, and so the Harley Cemetery site that Pete had mentioned earlier, you know, we've been trying to work closely with Pete's group to try to find home for some of these piles. And it's advantageous to both parties, right? Pete's group gets these things out of the floodways, out of the floodplains. Many of our sites in redevelopment along waterways, especially in the tidal areas, need to raise the elevation of their properties to be resilient and to meet the flood rules for development, get flood insurance and all that. So there's opportunities for these piles to be used on brownfield redevelopment, land elevation, where the contaminants are like on like, meaning, you know, if you have low levels of metals in the area where the dirty dirt pile is, and you have low levels of metals on your brownfield site, you might be able to make a match for those two properties to be able to take that material in. Oftentimes the brownfield site is looking for material. So if the site is looking for material and we can make these matches, great. They will then they may charge a much lower tipping fee, meaning charging the people to dump the material at their site. They may charge no tipping fee. When we were able to make the match at National Park Landfill, Ron was working on that project. We're putting solar on it. The landfill had not been properly closed, so they were in the process of grading the landfill to make it appropriate for solar reuse, as well as trying to properly close the landfill. They needed, there's not enough clean material out there to be able to grade a landfill and then put a proper cap on it, and the cost would be prohibitive. So we were able to make this match where Harley was able to truck the material to the site. National Park landfill was able to accept the material. It was a great deal for both parties. So those are the kind of matches that we're looking to make in this program. So, you know, if anybody has knowledge of sites that need material, also one other thing I'd like to mention is when we're doing landfill closure, the opportunities to take additional types of material is much different or greater. The opportunities are a little more open for landfill closure, right, Ron, as opposed to a brownfield. So, you know, there is a lot of activity in the solar world right now, and a lot of the, you know, we get calls about looking for opportunities to do solar on brownfields or landfills. But
so, Bill, the National Park landfill isn't technically a brownfield, or because I kind of saw, you know, funding. It was kind of called a brownfield, I think, in NGEMS.
It is,
Yeah.
but it is a landfill as well, and sort of the rules about what type of material can be placed on a brownfield.
Yeah, that was awesome.
There's some hairs to split, but we'll be able to guide anyone who needs who needs information on that. We'll be able to
I was
provide
just
some
speaking
guidance.
with the office manager at Harley, and they're forever grateful.
Yeah, no,
they have a shoestring budget, and they just absolutely did not. They just, you know, they were freaking out a few years ago.
And we can do more of this, and you know, it's just a matter of coordination. This is what better government's about, right?
Absolutely.
So you know, we look forward to working with Pete. If anybody in the audience has any questions about where some of these piles are located, and we can provide information on that. So, Pete, I appreciate you guys coming in today, and we'll have some more conversations.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks, Dave.
Yep, you got it, Pete.
Any questions?
Oh yeah, any quick questions for Pete?
There are some questions.
Oh, there are, Pete.
Oh.
This is a comment from Joe Hawkrider. Pete, good to see an initiative to deal reasonably with orphan dirt piles. Good example of pragmatism. However, brownfield sites need much more relief in using alternative fill beneath building sites than the recent guidance readily allows. This issue is far bigger and more critical to brownfield developers than orphan piles. We need a healthy dose of pragmatism from the department in this area.
I'm sure Pete would agree.
I agree.
But Pete's
You can only go so far with pragmatism in the bureaucracy.
Can we quote that, Pete?
Sure. Just put it alongside dirty dirt.
All right, thank you, Joe. Anybody else?
And we've got another question from Ray Papperman. Can you expand on coordination with solid waste or solid waste enforcement when dealing with contaminated or slightly contaminated fill?
Dave?
You want me to take that, Pete?
Yeah,
sure. I mean, more recently, I think you've been, dealing with them a lot.
A lot of times it's it's collaborative. It'll be a joint inspection, joint enforcement action. When we were C&E together, compliance and enforcement together before the reorg, a lot of times we'd issue one administrative order, one ACO to be coordinated. Sometimes you have a situation where you're dealing with mostly a land use matter, and perhaps we'll just take the lead and we'll just FYI solid waste, or vice versa. If most of contaminated fill is outside wetlands, floodplains, we'll let solid waste take the lead. We'll get the FYI and we'll provide a technical input to solid waste. But we are very much coordinated with solid waste. It's probably the office we work most with out in the field, conducting joint inspections. If not doing that, then communicating about sites, figuring out who should take the lead. Should both offices be involved, and kind of have this coexistence here in an enforcement action. So every site is different, every case is unique, so there's a lot of communication, and then we make a strategic decision, and we forge ahead, and we help each other out tremendously. I communicate with my solid waste and CHOP partners many times a week.
Yeah. Couldn't said it better.
Yes. Well, one more? Yep, one more question, Pete.
Just wondering if the files that you know about, are they going to be tested against the new interim standards for PFAS?
Ooh, full circle. I suppose that they would need to be to figure out if we have a like-on-like scenario, yeah.
Mm.
And that's interesting with the PFAS too, Bill, in that we focus so much on the heavy metals, the PAHs, but with PFAS coming to the forefront in drinking water and soil, it's likely going to be a significant component of what we do going forward, even in the land use world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what those levels that are like, you guys went over earlier, but I mean, how prevalent is that statewide? Or is it constant, is it more likely to find PFAS like in Camden and to Mercer County or everywhere?
If you caught wind of someone with fire fighting foam or things like that, or manufacturing for like Gore-Tex, those types of manufacturing practices. Yeah.
I think that knowledge base is still being built. So, all right. Well, I greatly appreciate you guys today coming in to talk to us about dirty dirt, and hopefully we can make some connections for you and that benefit everybody. So thanks a lot, guys.
Okay.
You got it. Thanks, Bill.
Got it.
All right, we're running a little behind, but we still have plenty of time for our friends at EPA to speak about whatever they wish to speak about.
That's dangerous to say that. First and foremost, thanks, Bill. Thanks to your group and everybody here. It was always a pleasure being a part of the quarterly meetings. I will say, though, dirty dirt. So for my Wu-Tang Clan days, Dirt McGirt, I mean, it comes to mind, so I think that's where you stole it from, but we'll talk about that later on.
Well, the Bill didn't steal.
Yeah.
Oh, no. So I got a couple of things to toss your guys' ways. Let me just go through some of the big ticket items. For those who did apply under the fiscal year 23 multi-purpose assessment revolving loan fund cleanup, these are all the big grants that we have at EPA Brownfields program. When that announcement closed, currently right now, I believe we received nationwide close to about 500 applications. The headquarters is still undergoing its eligibility determinations. And so we will begin in our region to conduct the review process that will probably take us through February or early March. So I just want to give everyone a heads up that that's just the timeline in which we're working under. Those particular grants, as folks may have heard before, are being infused not just with our annual appropriation funds that we get from Congress, but also from the infrastructure funds. So these are larger grants going forward, which we're very pleased to see. And hopefully that will mean greater work being done in these communities. Next, I will note that next week sometime, I can't give a date because I can't say that, but there probably will be the job training announcement. And I know many folks here may not necessarily play in that arena right now, but I will further promote that, going forward, as we talk about, these projects and the need for environmental technicians, the capacity of nonprofit orgs, others in the job training arena is worthwhile. It really supports disadvantaged communities by providing, recruitment and training essential activities towards getting people ready and primed for those green jobs going forward. So please consider in the next round, I believe this will be done on an annual basis, but like I just mentioned, next week there will probably be the national announcement of those that are selected. Next, I know earlier we heard from Kaylin from NJIT. I will note that EPA, with the infusion of the infrastructure funds, will be has already announced, and it will be closing on Valentine's Day, 2023 of all days. And this is the next technical assistance to Brownfield's program. As NJIT is currently our Region 2 tab provider, this will be sort of the next iteration that is going forward. Those particular grants will also include infrastructure funds, and they will be rather from $1 million for a 5-year period to $5 million. So a lot of money to be said. I will note, if our friends here at NJDEP, that I believe it's the 16th next week was the deadline for requesting funds for the FY23. 128, and that is a state response program, aka Brownfield's program. And historically, NJDEP has always come in on time, and we've supported as best we can their requests for funding for their program. Sorry, Shanine, I was going to talk about job training, but I see you back now. So I've already mentioned that just now, so sorry about that. Yeah, there we go, exactly. I will note, as part of the funds we're getting on infrastructure, we're bringing on new hires. As you know, Patrick, he had to leave us a little while ago, sorry about that. And we also have Ashita Patel in our group, but we're bringing on some new people. So hopefully by the next quarter, those folks may be in, and we'll introduce everybody to you guys. No? Sorry about this here. On the topic of CCI and BDA, I will note that currently in the region, our regional administrator, as part of environmental justice and climate change discussions, is looking to identify strategic communities. Folks may, I think Frank had mentioned about, besides CCI that we had, we shared, of course, in that space, the community-driven solutions and other things. So there's going to be sort of a new iteration, not sure what it's going to be called, but there's going to be an identification of certain communities throughout that's going to be sort of focusing attention and resources to be brought to bear in terms of some of those projects that are ongoing. Once again, showing a collaborative opportunity in that space. We will let you guys know as soon as we find out. Then also in terms of, this is important, ASTM 1527-21. For those who don't know what that is, that's the phase 1 environmental site assessment process. Currently in the agency, we are, I think our Office of General Counsel and the Federal Register Liaison are completing the final approval process, and this is for updating the all appropriate inquiries. So this is sort of for EPA what we need going forward for eligibility determinations and moving forward on environmental site assessment work. That is sort of nearing the timeline, so maybe that will be a Christmas gift coming shortly. So that's currently where we stand on that. I think I got everything off the plate here. Yeah. So I would just open it up for Shanine or Adolph. If there's anything else to add?
Oh, yes. Hello. Sorry, cutting in, interjecting. Just want to mention that our Brownfield conference is taking place again in 2023 in Detroit. I think it's August 14th to the 16th. We could get you the dates, but most importantly, the call for ideals is now open. So we are looking for really great brownfield projects in the region to highlight. So we would love to partner with your communities to present at a panel at the conference, which I think would be great to highlight some of the work that we're doing here in the region. So it's open now. I think that the deadline to submit is February 6th, so we have some time. So if you guys are interested, you can reach out to me. You can also go to the Brownfields 2023 website where you can get some more information on how to submit. Did I not say Detroit?
You did. I was like, because Motor City,
Scandal. Anyway, so looking forward to seeing some of you guys there.
You said that's 2023?
Yes. And so we plan on having, not just, the folks you see here, but also the new folks, because it's a great opportunity for folks who haven't started in the Brownfields program or new folks in the communities out here to really participate and really talk about the opportunities for networking going forward. So looking forward to that. But yeah, any questions? Would definitely like to entertain those.
Yeah, we have a question online from Melissa Dolinsky. She said, can you tell us how many applications from New Jersey were received during the latest MARC competition?
We can neither confirm nor deny. Unfortunately, we cannot indicate at this time the number per state. We could just say nationally, what the numbers are right now. So it's close to about 500.
And then we had a comment from Philip Gianarelli. Sorry if I said that wrong. Good presentation, Terry. Can you send a summary of the schedules and milestones you discussed?
Absolutely, will do. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions in-house or online for Terry or Shanine? No. All right. I know we ran over a little bit, but only because we had such awesome presenters today. But we do have a few minutes left. If anybody, open discussion or comments or ideas that anybody wants to throw out there, whether it's virtually or in the room. J.R. Capasso of Trenton.
Never for lack of something to say. So, dry cleaners. We've been talking about them and dancing around them forever, right? In Trenton, we dedicated our entire last EPA assessment grant to looking at what are now city-owned dry cleaning sites. We just applied for a $2 million cleanup grant to EPA to clean up a city-owned dry cleaner. That site is also in a BDA, I'm pretty sure, so we will probably be coming after HDSRF for the same site. And this is the tip of the iceberg. We own a handful of dry cleaners now. Some of them we know they're horrible, and other ones we're just starting to find out. But I think it was a huge mistake many years ago that somehow dry cleaners didn't get included in some DEP trigger program, like gas stations and underground storage tanks. So I'd like to try to throw that out as an agenda item in the future. And I've been contacted by several different people at DEP. So DEP's throwing a lot of resources at this. They have like Andy Sears group went around doing VI investigations in various sites. I got contacted by another person at DEP where there's a group that their job is to figure out like unknown sources of contamination, and they go figure out where it's coming from. It seems like most of those are PCE impact, probably from some dry cleaner. So, I think the horses left the barn in most of these sites. In Trenton, we counted close to 200 potential former dry cleaners. Only 8 of those sites are actually on data miner. So it's like a huge, expensive problem that there isn't really even a mechanism to put these people into a program. And we could also do that potentially under, once upon a time, somebody was talking about brownfields prevention ordinances, and I would like to see who's maybe trying to do that. And maybe that's something that DEP could try to get a handle on. Like originally that was used in the context of like junkyards and things like that. But junkyards actually surprisingly make a whole lot of money that you don't think they make. So in Trenton, junkyards are into, we don't let people build more junkyards, but the ones that are there aren't leaving. Like they make money, they're not going anywhere. But I think that would be something else where we'd like to figure out how to make sure that these don't become future problems to the taxpayers. But dry cleaners even worse, because even right now, people are closing up dry cleaners, painting the building, selling them, and now I'm getting calls from attorneys. And believe it or not, people still do buy properties without doing their due diligence. And this is the same property that actually DEP is now trying to get access to. And
yeah. No, let's, Jamila, maybe we could set up a meeting with JR and talk about some of the brownfield prevention measures. And also, we'll try to get a speaker in here for speaking about sort of the update on orphan dry cleaner sites in the state maybe for the next roundtable.
Okay, great.
Right, thank you. Any other topics or questions from anyone? No? Okay, well, we're wrapping up just about on time. I want to thank everybody for participating today. I want to thank all my speakers and certainly the participants for coming. We are always looking for ideas about additional topics that are of interest to you in our audience, and we are always looking for feedback about the stuff that we presented. So if you enjoyed the work that we did today, please let us know that. And if you have any ideas about future topics related to brownfields or peripherally related to brownfields, we look forward to hearing from you. We work really hard to try to keep it interesting, but we need your help. So thank you, everybody. Have a great holiday season. And we look forward to seeing you probably sometime in March. Rachel, the next one, usually? Probably March.
Yep, next one should be around March.
Yeah, and we'll get you out a list of dates to hold soon. So thank you, everyone.